Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be here tonight at 5:30 this time. I'm Gaborik, Superintendent of the Fairbanks Northstar Borough School District, and I have some guests with me tonight. I'm excited. So I have President Wendy, Dominique. Thank you for joining, and also our Chief Operations Officer, Andy DeGrau. And tonight is about budget, and it's going to be, I think, more exciting maybe than it would have been last week. So we know there's lots of questions out there. One, we're going to talk about the proposed budget tonight, but we will also talk about the governor's budget and kind of work our way through that. So we will start with an overview of the proposed budget, and I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. Basically, this is a status quo budget. I mean, we are trying to maintain the same level of services that we have for students right now, with a couple of add-ins and some critical areas to support kids where we feel like they need to be supported. So the assumptions that are in the proposed budget that the school board is working on right now, the assumptions are that we will receive the funding that the legislature passed and committed to school districts last spring. So that's what we're counting on. So, we know what those numbers are. It was the same base student allocation, $5,930 per student, and then also forward funding of statewide, it was $30 million. And that would mean almost $3 million to Fairbanks. So those numbers are built into the proposed budget. So there are a couple highlights from the proposed budget. I just wanted to talk a little bit. So in the budget book, you can get this online, and you can also get a hard copy if you want to. But we are, because our enrollment is down, there will be reductions of teachers across the school district. So our teacher staffing is formulaic, and it's based on how many kids actually are attending each school. So that's based on our October count and then projections into what the next year might look like. So part of the issue is our enrollment trends have been going down. And so it's almost between what we projected last year for this year and what we're projecting for next year, it's over 400 students that we will be decreasing in terms of our budget. So that's actually kind of a big hit for us already. So because of that, there'll be some reductions. There are some reductions in the proposed budget. There's 13 reductions of teachers at the elementary level. And then also we have a new charter school starting up, Discovery Peak, and that's in North Pole, which will be a wonderful addition to North Pole so that the North Pole community has a school of choice and some options there. We'll be moving teaching positions from the elementary schools to Discovery Peak based on how many kids come from each school and go over to Discovery Peak. So after they do their lottery, we'll know how many kids those are, and then we'll even all that out and make sure that there's the right number of teachers in the right number of schools. So we're making a couple of investments at the elementary level, and one is for an extra teacher at Joy Elementary. And the reason for that is that we have 3 K-8 schools that came on board this year. So we have Ladd Elementary, Arctic Light, and Joy. Ladd and Arctic Light received teachers on the front end to help with their K-8 expansion. Joy did not last year. They started moving in the K-8 direction without an extra teacher. So I'm giving them one this year so that it'll be equitable, and then they have another teacher to support their K-8 efforts. We are also adding a prevention intervention specialist at Tickassook Brown to help meet the student needs of that school community, and so that'll be a nice addition there. At the secondary level, again, because of enrollment decreases, we'll have a reduction of almost 9 teachers at the secondary level. And then again, there'll be some Discovery Peak teachers that get moved from North Pole Middle to Discovery Peak, because Discovery Peak will be K-8, so they'll have 7th and 8th grade in North Pole as well. So we're also making a couple of investments at the secondary level. We're adding career technical education teachers at North Pole High and West Valley. So we've got lots of student interest in our career tech ed classes, so we'll be adding that. We're also adding prevention intervention specialist positions at North Pole High and North Pole Middle to help with those schools. So district-wide, we're making some reductions. Actually, in Andy's office, he's doing some contracting in the proposed budget, doing some reorganizing and being more efficient. So there's loss of 1.5 positions there. And then we have some district-wide investments. And one that's really important is we've been looking at our support staff, and we've got to make some adjustments to our pay scale. And so we're going to start with our grade 5 secretaries, and we're going to reclassify all of our grade 5 secretaries across the district to grade 6. And that way the pay will better match their job position. So that's also in the budget. We need to invest in curriculum materials, English language arts and social studies, and if you're interested in what grade levels and where that's at, definitely get online and look at our budget documents, because some are at elementary and some are at secondary. And then, because there's been so many issues nationally, phishing scams and cybersecurity attacks, and there's been municipalities and school districts in Alaska where their data has been held hostage and they've had to deal with ransom issues and all kinds of things. So we are recommending that we add a cybersecurity officer to help us to start take care of our technology security issues. So that's also in the proposed budget. So important notes, there are a couple revenue pieces that we still don't know the answer to yet, meaning I have to make sure I have revenue to cover costs for our negotiated agreements. So we are currently in negotiations with all three of our associations. So that's our certified teachers, our support staff, and our principals. So there will be labor costs. We just don't know the outcome yet of those contract negotiations. So we'll need to be sure and cover those costs. And then also we'll have a benefit rate increase as we go through healthcare adjustments. So just in terms of process, I submitted my proposed budget to the school board, and actually they're working on that proposed budget right now. And so between now and March 22nd, they have a number of work sessions scheduled and lots of opportunity for public input, both at regular board meetings and at work sessions. So if you'd like to know those meetings, you can check out the schedule online. We actually just held our first work session this past Monday. If you feel like you can't get into a school board meeting, or you just don't have time, to email a board member, you can call. You can also on the website there's a communication button. It's called Let's Talk. It's right on our budget website, and you can give input, as much input as you'd like, to school board members regarding the budget. All that gets collected every 2 weeks, and then we pass it on to the school board. So, and it's completely unfiltered. Whatever you write, they get all of that. So if you have any input at all about budget, be sure to get that to the board. So I think I'll pause there for just a minute and talk with our guests here. And so I have a question for President Dominique. So in the proposed budget, we have some investments such as a prevention intervention specialist, career tech teachers, curriculum materials, the cybersecurity officer. So, what are your thoughts from a school board member's perspective about those investments?
I think those are great investments. I know, I can't say if it was last year or the year before, we had a full staff of prevention intervention specialists. Right. And I'm happy to see that we're investing back into that. We have a community that's a great community, but when you have legalized marijuana, kids need that intervention so that they understand that these things are not for them, so they don't go down that road and have to come back again. And the career tech positions, they are definitely needed. I think it's a great thing to have those. Curriculum material, people don't think we need those, but we really need curriculum materials. And cybersecurity, that is a great one to have on board.
I think those prevention, the school board, of course, sees, you see kids that get into pretty serious trouble, and a lot of times it is drugs and alcohol type issues. So yeah, I think supporting kids at the school level, maybe trying to do some education around that before they get to you guys.
Exactly, so that they understand the implications of starting early is not good.
Right.
It's a bad thing.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, and so then for Mr. DeGrau, so you're our new Chief Operations Officer. How many months now?
Just 6 months or so.
6 months? Okay, so how has your experience been in our district with the budgeting process so far? And especially, Mr. DeGrau runs one of our input groups, the Budget Committee. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, specifically about the budget process. When I first became aware of the opportunity to come back to Fairbanks, some people are aware I grew up in Fairbanks, so it was a move back home for me. Being the budget officer in my prior positions, the first thing I researched about the school district was the budget process, and was very impressed immediately as I researched in the process that the district has outlined to build the budget, that it's linked to the strategic plan, that it follows specific goals and benchmarks that the district wants to accomplish. And some people might be surprised by this, but the budget process and the actual budget itself is very transparent compared to my experience in 2 other school districts that I've worked at. the level of detail that is put out at 3 different versions of the budget, proposed, recommended, and approved, significantly more transparent than what I've been accustomed to, and that's a great thing. I think transparency for me personally, on the money side of things, is a top priority, to be transparent in what the district wants to accomplish and how we're allocating resources. Specifically, Dr. Gaborik asked about the budget committee, and that also links to transparency, because it's an opportunity for stakeholders to come together to see how the budget is built, see the different nuts and bolts and different aspects of the budget, to ask questions, to have dialogue, and to ultimately to provide input and feedback to administration, to the Board of Education. And it's a great process that I've had the benefit to be a part of.
So now, President Dominique, you've been on the budget committee before, right?
Yes, several of them.
Yeah. So, and you feel like that's a pretty valuable group. I mean, the board takes that input pretty seriously.
Yes, we do. We take it very seriously. I know in several years there have been people on the budget review committee that expected us to take all their recommendations and make those changes. We can't always do that because they have enough information, I feel, to get themselves in trouble with. And they give us good recommendations, but you have to know the whole picture and be able to implement the things that are going to impact this group, may not impact this other group, and then you have to give to another, take away.
Right.
So it's a very valuable group. It really is.
You know, that's one of the things a school board really has to do is just weigh all the input. Because you get it from parents, you get it from teachers, you get it from support staff, students even have come.
Family members.
Yeah, family members have come and testified. We've had some really amazing student testimony in the past. So advocating for music, advocating for electives,
and
really
sports and everything else.
Yeah, well-spoken kids. So the board then just has to weigh all that, right?
Yes,
and they really are in charge of seeing the big picture for the whole community and making sure that the entire education system meets the needs of the community. And our needs are, I mean, we've got the full spectrum of needs, right?
Yes,
we have a very diverse community, and we've got kids. We got our high flyer kids who are, AP classes, and we've got kids who need lots of support, and just, in academic and social, emotional, and so.
And we have to also understand that whenever we get students, it can be after the 20-day count. We still have to provide the services for those students, and we're not even paid for those yet.
And that is a great point, and your connection to the military, so you see families coming in after that 20-day count.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's kind of one of the challenges of, of course, people who are watching, I'm sure, know that, but we serve 2 military installations. So we serve the Army base and the Air Force base, and we have a number of students. I'm not going to have a percentage right off the top of my head, but a significant portion of our students are, so many live in North Pole, of course. We have families that attend way out at Eielson, and then the Army base, we kind of have families all over in town, so yeah. Well, great. So I am going to ask, so we got a question, some questions ahead of time, and so some of these I know questions relate to the governor's budget, so I'll talk about that in just a minute, but some of them I think also relate to questions that we got just in general about the proposed budget. So one from Tracy Tucker Ball was, district-wide, how many layoffs would be anticipated, and does the board have a plan to offset the proposed budget? So let's take it from the perspective of just the proposed budget where we think we're going to get the money that we have. So I can say, if we get the money that the legislature committed, we wouldn't actually be looking at layoffs next year. So we would have reductions based on student enrollment, but it's not so many that we can't absorb those. And so again, because we're a military community, we have folks moving. We saw retirement numbers last night, and you have families that move. So we're actually hopeful, again, that if the funding comes in like we want it to, that we wouldn't have to do a lot of layoffs. That just naturally, through attrition and people moving, we can absorb all that. So, and you've seen that too. We have a wonderful retirement celebration at the end of the year,
and
so
great.
So usually there's enough turnover. I always say elementary, a little bit more turnover, and so we're able to hire a lot of new elementary teachers that come in. And we were talking about UAF hiring everybody that UAF gives us last night. So I think we've had some pretty good teachers come out of our system.
We have.
So
we've had quite a few. It's trying to keep them here so that they can become teachers.
Yes. Yeah. Great point. And so that, we've been talking about that too, just being concerned about, and I'll jump into the governor's budget here in a moment, but when there's cuts suggested that are so drastic, right? Like the university and the school district and in other areas, we start to worry about instability, right? Economic instability in Fairbanks and people moving. And you said it great last night, like, don't move, right? We don't want people to move, like, stay
We're
here.
trying to get them here so they
Yeah.
can see what our great town is all about.
Yeah.
We have a great town here, but a lot of people looking afar, they never know that.
They
They
would-
have to come here and experience it.
Experience it, yeah.
And that's one kind of advantageous, the timing on the negotiations. The big topic is not only trying to attract teachers, but also to be able to retain them and get them to
Yes.
stay.
Mhm.
And so to try to put a focus through negotiations on what kind of things can we do with a specific finite amount of resources to be able, what is attractive to teachers and other employees, all staff
Yes.
across the district. What's attractive to them benefits wise that we can try to come to agreement on to try to get people to stay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and things like, right, there's conversation around, if the state retirement system is not what it used to be, so is there anything we can do?
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
we are, I'm gonna say this on TV and say, don't quote me on this, but I think we're the third largest employer in the community, right? The school district is one of
believe
the
so.
largest employers. There's a university, there's civil service and the military, there's the school district, and then Banner Health, right, the healthcare system. So we are in the top 4. So a lot of people depend on us for employment, and so we really are an integrated part of the community. So
But I've also told people, they think that we live in igloos up here, and I keep telling them, come here and see, we live just like
Right.
you live, it's just
Right.
colder, that's all.
right, we have running water.
Yes, we
Nice
do.
Cell phones. And,
What? Cell phones?
Running
Yeah.
cars.
We have Facebook Live.
We have Facebook Live. We're on it. So, okay, governor's budget. Now, this one is interesting. So we've had a lot of conversation. We have a lobbyist, John Ringstad, and so he's working double time right now, trying to get information, because the interesting thing is right now that yes, Governor Dunleavy rolled a budget with significant cuts, but there's a lot of questions about what the process would look like, what it is, what it is he can and can't do through the process, what it is the legislature can and can't do. What about that funding that was committed, right? I mean, that the legislature did commit to us last year. There's been talk about, well, the governor isn't really suggesting a change in the base student allocation. He's suggesting he's short funding education. Okay, what does that mean?
Exactly.
Nobody's
Yes.
quite sure.
Mhm.
Our interior delegation is hard at work too, and if you happen to watch Gavel to Gavel, there's been some really fascinating.
Great conversations.
Yeah,
This is
sessions.
the best gavel to gavel I've ever seen.
Usually, I play it in my office and I'm not paying attention. I've been
and you
glued
fall
to the
asleep
TV,
on it, but
right?
this year, man, I've been on it. I've
Yeah.
been turning it on at work, and I've been watching it and
Glued to the
listening. And
TV.
yes, it's very good conversation on gavel to gavel.
And I
this year.
have to give a shout out. I didn't. I should probably do this. I haven't been able to watch all of it, but I watched Senator Bishop in
Oh, yeah.
right. It was at Finance Committee 2 days ago, and he was
Mhm.
such an advocate for
He
Fairbanks
was.
and education. And I happened to talk to him on the phone afterward, and I said I wanted to give you a standing ovation.
Yes.
Thank you. So,
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Bishop, once again.
Yes.
So the governor's budget, it is drastic. I mean, right? I mean, you just have to read the newspaper to know that it's drastic. And so first of all, I want to say we recognize, and I think the state realizes, the legislature is sending us signals that look, that's not real, right? I mean, there's no way that they are going to be supportive of that level of cuts.
That's right.
It may be that something happens. We need to be ready for something. But I'm just going to talk about sort of some crazy big numbers of if it did happen, what this would look like. So the decrease in state foundation funding to Fairbanks is $26.4 million. If they also took away the forward funding, that would be another $3 million. So the total reduction to funding just to Fairbanks School District would be $29 million, which is what percentage of our budget?
That's about 15% of our
15,
overall
of our operating budget. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So previously they approved $113.8 million for Fairbanks. This would take it down to $84.5 million. It's about a 26% impact to just the state funding we get. We also get impact aid, and we get money from other areas. And so, again, 14 to 15% of operations revenue. So that's not a small number to deal with. So let me start by saying I do have to build a plan to address that. But it's almost, and we talked about this at the work session last night, right? we're gonna focus on the proposed budget and the funding that we, again, know was committed last spring. I'm gonna build a plan in response to the governor's budget, and I'll talk about timelines in just a minute, and we're gonna kinda have to have two plans going. We're gonna spend most of our effort on the plan that we feel like is pretty legitimate, but I've gotta keep this other one going too, just because we don't know what the end game will be. Okay, so again, just big, I mean, really kind of ridiculous numbers. Of course, if the governor's budget were to come to fruition, it would hit district-wide supports, school supports, student supports, class size. $30 million, if all you did was look at teachers, that would be 260 teachers from Fairbanks. I mean, it's
Unheard of.
like
Yes.
my brain stops working.
not
Yes.
Okay, it
computable.
doesn't work. So now, I don't know if I told you guys this one. If we were to cut 260 teachers, kindergarten class sizes would be at 55,
Oh my.
and high school classes would be at 63, right? Okay, now first of all, we would never start with teachers, right? You never start at the classroom, you start in administration. So, but that's just that. So if people are looking for a number to help advocate, I mean, use that number. Say 260 teachers, are you kidding me? That makes no sense. Okay, on the other side, so of course we're gonna start on the other end of the spectrum and look at administration. But if we were to the extreme, again, just start eliminating administration pieces, all district-wide supports, the list that I'm going to read you would only get us to about 22 million, and that would mean no Board of Education support. You guys would be here, but you'd have no support behind you, so I'm not quite sure how that would work.
We have to type up our agendas and everything else, huh?
No superintendent's office, nothing related to me. No communications, development, and engagement. That's our community partnerships, our communications, our grants department. No administrative services, so there's no payroll, right? There's no purchasing. There's gone.
Budget preparation.
No human resources, so we can't hire anybody, we can't do subs, we can't do any of that. No special education district-wide support, and no information and technology district-wide support. All of that would only get us to 22.3 million. So I mean, that's just as ridiculous, right? I mean, it's just, it makes no sense. So, and after that list, I would still have 7 million in cuts that I would have to do. So then if I cut facilities district-wide support, then we would get there. So what we'd be left with is teachers and principals and instructional aides and school secretaries and custodians and a teaching and learning department to support instruction, and then nothing else.
A school board.
And a school board, right? And a school board, right? But nobody nothing else. So nobody would get paid. Somebody said, would they volunteer?
Yeah,
I don't know.
No payroll.
Yeah, no payroll. Yeah. So again, it's just such big numbers. You can't even.
It's insane.
You just can't even wrap your head around it.
Yes.
So back to being, I think serious and responsible. So my approach, I do have to build a plan for the 30 million because you just don't know exactly where you'll land, and so you got to start somewhere, and then you just kind of work with the legislature and the governor as they go through that process. My plan will be to present a much more balanced approach. Of course, the school board's priority is always class size, so we always start at our end, and it's going to have to trickle down. There'll be something there. And then on March 4th at the work session, I'll present that sort of $30 million Armageddon plan, is what I've been calling it, to the board. So at least they know what it is that would look like and what my recommendations around that would be. So with that, let me stop again and ask some questions. So President Dominique, you were in Juneau recently with 2 other board members and with our lobbyist, John Ringstad. So what were your takeaways like from the legislators and what they're thinking about and in terms of education and what you saw down there?
We were totally on the same wavelength. Everybody that we went and spoke to, we talked to people in the hallways, and they were asking us, what are you guys going to do? And we said, we can't do anything. We won't have any money. That we have to close our doors. We have to increase school size. And they knew that already, but they just wanted to hear it to verify that that's along the same lines they've been talking about. We went to one conference hearing, and everyone that spoke from AASB, they were talking the same things. I mean, the villages, they don't have a lot there as it is.
Right.
They're barely maintaining, and they spoke about how they have to close their doors as well.
Yeah.
It's just an insane offering.
That's really, I think as an urban district, you have to look out for your rural neighbors.
You do.
So closing a school or schools to us, again, which would be a down the road situation, but I mean, you close a school in a village and that might be it,
That's
right? And then what? Then what happens with the kids that are there in the community? I mean, it's catastrophic.
And they use their schools, not like we use our schools for a lot of things as well, but they use their schools for everything.
Right, the community.
The community center, it could be
It's the hub of everything.
the nighttime movie theater or whatever. They use it for everything.
Right.
And you close it, and what do you have? You have communities trying to leave, just like we're trying to maintain here, and it just doesn't make sense.
Right, right. Yeah, so I think it's important, and we've had some great outreach again from Tanana Chiefs. I heard from Ed Alexander and other advocates saying, to all the interior superintendents saying, hey, we need to message together on this. And of course, Mayor Bryce Ward and I have talked, and I won't get into the municipal side, but he's facing some significant challenges too. So this really is a community advocacy effort.
Yes, it is.
So, Mr. DeGrau, then to you were just at the National Association of School Business Officers Conference, and I know there were a lot of Alaskan business officials there. So, I mean, what are the highlights from that conversation?
Yeah, it was actually good timing. In my brief 6 months here, I've kind of been baptized by fire into local politics and now state politics. I got thrown into the deep end real quick, so it was a good opportunity for me to rub shoulders with fellow Alaska finance officers and ask questions. I'm new and just getting my feet wet in the political environment here, and I asked them, how does this compare to prior years? I mean, we're in probably the 4th or 5th year of some tough financial times, but but the message, kind of the consistent message was that this unfortunately feels different than prior years, and I think that the main points were the magnitude of the cuts, the proposed cuts, and then just we are in somewhat of a different political environment.
Yes.
The political reality has changed a little bit. So a consistent message was kind of like you mentioned earlier, we don't really know if the $29 million cut to our district is necessarily real. It's a possibility, but how real is that? But the consistent message was people are starting to brace for some level of cut.
Right.
And that might not have been the case in the past. So that was a consistent message that I heard, and kind of just piggybacking on some of President Dominique's comments about Juneau. I had the opportunity to rub shoulders with a lot of our people in Juneau a couple weeks ago. Visited with Mr. Ringstad, and it was great timing and really solid, consistent across the board support from our people in Juneau for education. And I'm going to kind of put words in their mouths, but I heard it loud and clear that, and I feel this strongly, that strong public education in Alaska equals a strong economy.
That's exactly
there's a direct link, and it ultimately means a strong Alaska. If our education system it becomes underfunded and that starts to deteriorate, it has a significant trickle-down effect to the economy and to the state health in general.
And so, not to put you on the spot, but when you move to a new town, what's the very first thing you look for?
Yeah, you look for
The
schools.
School, right?
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, you are looking at the
Absolutely.
quality of the schools.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's top.
Right.
That's
I mean,
even
I'm sure
military.
I'm sure you were
Yep.
looking at where, right?
Yep.
Our military
Our
families
military
actually are
is the
super
first thing they do.
They're super
Yeah.
savvy. They get, I mean,
Yes.
because they move so much. They get on the websites. We get questions all the time about, tell me about this school, tell me about test scores, tell me about activities. Yeah.
Right.
So,
And
yeah.
very.
So I have to say, and I'll get a little bit political here, but that's what frustrates me a little bit when I hear like the state chamber, it supports cuts to public education. I'm like, that does not connect with me. I mean,
Right.
because again, like you said, you need a strong public education school system to support. I mean, it is the foundation of your economy.
That's
So
right.
anyway, and I know I think our local chamber has been very supportive of us. And so again, I just want to say that we're engaged with that group, and we've been to a lot of different chamber meetings and participate. And so I hope chamber just thinks about those things. The
Yes,
state chamber
absolutely.
association, because I think it's important. So
And I think it's an opportunity for educators to tell the story of the successes that we have on an ongoing basis. We do it at board meetings and to people on the street, and I think just to continue doing that, the importance of strong public education is huge.
Definitely.
So
I want to get back to a couple questions. I want to touch on Tracy Tucker Ball's question again about layoffs. So if the $30 million plan, so again, I have to build a plan just in case, and then some version of that. It's very possible that we would be running layoffs, and so I'll put a layoff plan. I've actually done it every year for the past 5 because a couple years we've had to do layoffs. Now last year we didn't have to because it worked out in the end. I mean, the funding worked out pretty well, but just in case. So I will put together a layoff plan, and the board will see that and then take action on it in late March, and then we'll just be ready. And whatever, again, if there are some level of cuts, if we don't have to do layoffs, of course we won't. But if we do, we're ready just in case. And then just so people know, with teachers, there are non-tenured teachers and tenured teachers, and tenured teachers have seniority, so it's non-tenured teachers first, and then tenured teachers. So that's always frustrating because your newest teachers, it's just a really difficult position for them to be in, and so we work to support our newest teachers as much as possible, and say, hey, don't give up and don't move, right? Because in the end, we're often able to hire lots of folks back, but it's just this really uncertain time. So we just have to be careful. And then there was, what about salaries and benefits? So Joyce, I'm not going to say her name right, I'm sorry. I'm not going to say it right. So anyway, Joyce D was asking about, you asked about the effect on teachers, so I touched on that, but also salaries and benefits. And so Andy is actually part of the district negotiating team, and the school board will have the final word on, the district, the team will take, sort of the work at the table back to the board. And so that's what they're negotiating right now, are salaries and benefits, and it's not, and we have to be super careful, we can't talk about it too much, because you can't negotiate away from the table, but, and it's not just for teachers, it's for support staff and principals as well. And so my philosophy is, and I'll just say this is Karen's philosophy as superintendent, is that we need to have a responsible contract. We've made some really important moves, and we've experienced savings in healthcare 3 years ago. All the teams came together and made some important moves there. But again, in support of our economy in Fairbanks, we need to be sure that our educators are fairly compensated. Now, again, you have to be responsible within sort of the fiscal context. That's just Karen's view of the world. So, I don't know if you want to comment on that at all, or no? Okay, I won't put you in that position. Yeah. So
always go overboard sometimes with those things. So I need to just be quiet.
Yeah. So, let's see. So I think we've hit some of the highlights. We talked about the budget. Oh, there's one very important thing that I wanted to say. This is why the governor's, this sort of really challenging budget that's in front of us is super important in terms of just keeping track of the legislative process, is because if there is any chance that cuts are coming, I have to keep very close track of the statutory deadline to notify teachers, and that statutory deadline is May 15th. And that's for all of our tenured teachers. If there's any chance it would hit tenured teachers at all, and that's the end of the school year, which is only 2 days later, for non-tenured teachers. So essentially, May 15th is the big date. But to prepare for that date, it takes our Human Resources Department about a week just to be sure about who exactly needs to be notified. And then our principals, then they also have to have a week to, once we give them their staffing numbers, to sort all that out. So at elementary, it's a pretty straightforward, formula, but at high school, they've got these huge master schedules, and they've got so many different teachers and so many classes, so it takes them some time. When I say, okay, here's your staffing, it takes them some time to figure out what their schedules are going to look like. So we're aiming, I have to know, let me say this again, I have to act on whatever number we have by at the end of April. And again, the frustrating part is that might not be the final number.
That's right.
Right? Because the board in the past, it's been after graduations that you guys have approved budgets.
And they're also talking this year, it may not be over in 90 days.
Yeah.
So,
right. And I believe, and in the past, the governor has vetoed funding legislation that impacted us on June, was it June 30th?
Yeah.
I mean, it was so late.
Yes, it was.
So that's the stress on the system. And so please know that all of us, I mean, especially the school board, very supportive of our teachers, very supportive of our staff. We don't want any more disruption than absolutely necessary, but we have to keep track of that deadline. And if we don't have an answer yet from Juneau what the funding is, we have to act on whatever best information we have at the moment. And so after the fact, once we know, we will try to bring back as many people as possible and sort of put all the pieces back in place, but there may be there may be some weeks there where it's really tough.
Mhm.
And that being said, we need people to advocate. So,
Most
and again, you were
definitely.
just in Juneau. Any suggestions in terms of what parents can do to advocate? I mean, what do you think? What would be the best thing?
Well, what I've been telling people and what people have been saying to me is they feel that this is off of the backs of the PFD. And they're saying that if the governor were to ask them, would they like a larger PFD or would they like education for their kids? Hands down, they said education for their kids. You got to have education for your kid. PFD is a 1-year thing. Yes, I like to have a larger PFD as well. But we really have to get to the point of the matter and realize that we have to educate our kids. And it takes funding, lots of funding, to educate your kids. I've already started the letter writing, helping people with their letters.
Oh, nice.
And the information that I've been given tonight, I'll pass that out as well.
Mhm.
And people just need to continue to write our legislators, and especially our governor, and let him know exactly where you are with this promise that has been given to you.
Mhm.
And I think that will help with his changing his mind as well.
Yeah, and what people's priorities are. And so,
Exactly.
I mean, what are your priorities?
Exactly.
So, our communications department on our website, they list all of the legislators. They've got, meaning the interior delegation, but links actually to
Mhm.
everybody. So a lot of people have connections to, in other communities as well. There's email. It's easy to email. You can pick
Yes.
up the phone. You can write a letter. And emails are just as powerful
Yes,
with the
they are.
legislators because they collect all that. So
Yes.
again, if you don't have a lot of time, just sending a quick message, and we'll be posting some highlights, just some information, some talking points that would be helpful for folks. So
Yes.
another thing that we'll do is after the March 4th budget work session, I'm going to do another Facebook Live, and I don't even think I've told you this yet. I'm just going to put it out there. So I invited the mayor to join me. So I would love to have like a more community conversation because again, the municipalities are getting huge
Most
pressure
definitely.
too.
Yes.
And if they take cuts, right, that could impact us. So again, I think a community effort to really have again just another conversation about where we're at, and he's in Juneau right now, I think. Or I believe the Alaska Municipal League is meeting in
Yeah, I think
Juneau.
he
So
is.
anyway, so that would be a great opportunity for the borough and the district to to have the conversation and just again talk about where we're at and talk about advocacy for our state. So let me see. Any final? I think we've hit a lot of our questions. Somebody said we need to find a funding source. Is that Sam Tuck? Sam, I think, ran for borough
Yes, he
assembly.
did.
That's right.
He
Yeah,
sure did.
we need to find a funding source. Yes. And an interesting thing is in Alaska, now different than school districts in other states, right? We can't raise revenue, right? So we, the
And you all
borough,
could.
right? The borough does that.
Yeah, in
for us.
Wyoming you couldn't, but in many states, school districts do have the ability to
To
raise
bond,
revenue, to
right?
bond,
Yeah.
and, yep.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So in Alaska, we rely on the state. We rely on the military in terms of impact aid because we have so many military students, and then we rely on the borough. And so that's so we.
But the
Yeah.
funding comes from the Constitution as well.
Right. And so, public education funding is a constitutional mandate.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's another great talking point. Again, I think if
Mhm.
people, it's helpful if you're going to write or call, that would be a great point to make.
Mhm.
So,
And they talked about that on Gavel to Gavel too. The
Oh,
conversation
okay.
was great.
yeah, good. Well, maybe just some final words. How about I'll start with Mr. DeGrau and me and let Miss President Dominique sort of wind us up. So, Mr. DeGrau, new COO, welcome to
welcome.
budget season in Alaska.
Welcome to the party. I never imagined political gavel to gavel would be exciting.
I'm
Right.
telling you.
But it's riveting.
Those of us who like it and like geek out secretly, we can be proud of it.
Yeah, I almost popped popcorn the other day while I was watching it. So, but yeah, I think I think it was Dr. Gaborik said opportunity to really identify our priorities as a state, as a community, as parents, as stakeholders. An opportunity to identify the priorities. Do we stand for a strong public education? And I think the vast majority of us do. And so, reach out to your legislators, write, advocate, I think it's an opportunity for us to set our priorities and then move forward, hopefully, in a productive way to educate students in Fairbanks the best we can.
That's right.
So, just my final parting words, just as the director of operations of the school district, I stand behind, I think Dr. Gaborik was mentioning it earlier, we want to provide the best compensation, salary, and benefits as we can for our employees. That's one of my top priorities, and obviously we're dealing with a limited set of resources, but I pledge to do everything the district can to make this district a desirable place where people want to come to work, because ultimately that benefits students. When we have happy employees, and every one of the employees in this district-wide, impacts students. And when we have happy employees, we have better served students. So.
And I think, the balance is, just very responsible, right? I mean, responsible contracts, responsible negotiations, and I always appreciate that our associations come to the table with great ideas, and there's just, there's good dialogue there, and so I appreciate that. And again, you can't tell me what's being said, so.
Well, I was just going to say, the vibe, I've heard how past negotiations have gone, and the vibe this year has started out very, very well.
Yeah,
so
good.
Pleased with that.
And I would just say, as somebody who was born and raised in Fairbanks and went through the school system here, I'm the product of the system. Like, I care about this community, and I'm glad you talked about employees, because in the end, we want the absolute best for our kids, right? I mean, we want our kids, and so this for me is what this is what it is for me. I want every child to get what it is they need from us, right? I mean, every student every day is kind of my little motto, and every student every day needs something different. And we need to recognize that. Kids need all kinds of different things, and as a superintendent, I want to be able to lead a system that's able to provide that. Sometimes it's social emotional, sometimes it's teachers, it's good transportation services, it's good food services. I mean, it's all these things, and so I want our kids to get what they need so they can learn and grow and then be just wonderful citizens in our community. So that's what's important to me. And also, please know, and I know it's really difficult when you start talking about cuts and layoffs and crazy numbers and things that don't make sense, but please know that I will do everything to take care of people as best we can when we can. There are some deadlines we have to hit, and if the legislature goes long and session goes long and we just don't know, there's going to be that really painful moment, but we will take care of people as soon as we can and keep things moving once we know what the final numbers are. So, Ms.
Yes.
Dominique?
Well, I just want to be sure that we take care of every single student we have in our district. Our students can be the mouthpiece in the lower 48. Even though they leave here in elementary school, we've had quite a few that have come back because they enjoyed what they had while they were here. And if we can put that across to our students and they enjoy it, that means you're easing the minds of the parents. The parents want their kids well educated. I know when I was listening to Gabble to Gabble the other day, listening to President Johnson, he was just laying it out exactly the way it is. If you cut your university resources in this area, the community suffers because you don't have people building themselves to a higher level. And to me, that's just simplistic. You have to understand it's all connected. You start with elementary, you go to high school, and you go off to college. Not everybody wants to go to college, but we have career technical for our students. CTE is fabulous here, and we need to make sure we keep it intact so everybody has a place and has an education. And then our kids can go out and spread the word that we don't live in igloos. We actually live in homes.
Educate the rest of the world. Well, thank you so much, Fairbanks community and stakeholders, and I know some of you are listening live tonight, and lots of other people will tune in and watch this later. Just thank you again for being a part of this, and keep in touch with us. Let us know how we can help you advocate. You will be our voice, and thank you to my guests. This was awesome.
Oh, I thought it was.
Thank you. I knew they were worried, and I said it'll be easy.
I know. I wasn't,
It'll
the
be
first
good.
time.
It'll be good, but we will be back for sure, definitely, and letting folks know where we're at and what's going on. And again, come to school board work sessions, write the school board, but actually, most importantly, right now, contact your legislator and the governor, and support public education. So,
Most definitely.
thank you.
Thank you.